faces yet, but they love to sneak surprise. They'll blame it on the news, it's lies. They'll say you can't trust history yet. They're all here to aid and to abet. I'm not afraid at all. They're not gonna take what's in us. They think they got us all. You're not gonna change what's in us. Snakes are chasing off their tails as leeches are increasing sounds. It's hard to tell who loves for real when everything's about the deal. I know that some have open eyes, I cannot hate fall for lies. But ask yourself now, who do you follow? But who do they follow? We're not afraid at all. They're not gonna take what's in us. We're gonna make a call. They don't know what's still left in us. We're gonna see it all. They're not gonna break what's in us. I gotta laugh, that's all. They can never shake what's in us. They come into your space and look all too familiar. They do not give you reason to share or better ways which to compare. There's only so many places that you can still be free. They don't want you to know your head. The microchip's not ready yet. I'm not afraid at all. We're gonna make the call. I might have seen it all. They're not gonna change what's in us. They think they got us all. They're not gonna shake what's in us.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to the 73rd official episode of Eunuch Corner Club Live. I have a wonderful guest who's a friend of mine, someone I luckily got to meet last year. Had a good time with him down south, and we're going to be having a good conversation today. But before we get started, I like to always thank the wonderful people that make this possible. And that would be these fine folks that you see on screen here. You can support me on Subscribestar for even $1 a month. I would deeply appreciate it. During the course of this stream, if there are things that you would like to share or say, questions for my wonderful guest, you can do so on Cash App, PayPal, Subscribestar, Entropy. And now that I stream to both Odyssey and Rumble, you can even leave paid chats on Odyssey and Rumble, and those dollars come directly to me. And if you don't have money or just don't want to spend it, but you still want to ask me and my guests something, you can use Entropy. That is the pinned comment in the question box, that is the pinned comment in the chat box there. Over on Entropy, there is a question box. You can put links, question, comments, etc. there at no cost to you, and I'll review them at the end of the stream. So with that being said, we're going to toggle back to my camera. And there we go. And we're going to bring on my wonderful guest, Pete Quinones. Hello, Pete.
I was muted. How are you doing? Yes.
Well, I'm doing great. I'm having fun. My channel is growing. I'm getting new people involved. I'm still having my fun, wild meme and news streams on Monday nights. Everything's going great. Things are going pretty good in my personal life. I started going back to the gym. I'm on a better diet. So I'm doing good. I'm even doing better than when you met me last year. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Me too. Been eating a lot better and been working out a lot. So
Well, you seemed healthy when I met you last year, and you still look good. And when you get to our age, looking the same as you did the year before is quite the task, isn't it?
Already looking at the marks under the eyes and like.
I see him in the mirror every day after the shower. I see him, yeah. But anyway, the reason I wanted to bring you on, first of all, my Corner Club series is where I highlight creators, artists, authors, people that I think are important and that bring a lot to the table for my goal of the unification of people who care. And whether you care and you come at this from an angle of race or religion or ethnicity or nationality, there are a lot of people right now that look at what we have to labor under and the turd sandwich that was handed to us by our forebears. And we want something different and we want something better. And I think the best way that we're going to get that is with art, literature, culture, discussions. And that's why I like having people on like you. Now, a lot of people that might be watching this video, we've only got about 40 right now, but hopefully we'll get some more in soon. Why don't you start by telling us why, who you are, first of all, and why you're the public personality with the podcast that you have today?
Well, I was born up in the Bronx in New York and left 2 days after I graduated high school. I moved south. I moved pretty much as far south as you can in the United States, but it's not the South. I moved to Fort Lauderdale, and then the Fort Lauderdale area. And then when I had a chance to get out, I went to Atlanta, the Atlanta area. And so I'm in Georgia. I'm in the South. I don't even know how much I can say that Georgia's the South anymore, considering what's happening to it. But
Fulton County especially.
Then I moved. I'm in Alabama, and I think I'm going to stay in Alabama and probably die in Alabama. It's been quite a little trip from growing up in the Bronx and being somebody who, my mom at one time worked for a state senator representative.
Oh, wow.
And growing up in a very Democrat area, and then moving to the South and becoming whatever it is I believe now. Mm-hmm. And about 6 years ago, I was a libertarian. I was an anarcho-capitalist, and there really weren't. When I started my podcast, there were podcasts out there, but there weren't as many. I mean, everyone has a podcast now. There weren't a lot. And I think it was a combination of me having a pretty big social media following, mm-hmm. and people liking my voice, that I got some fans pretty quick. And I decided I was going to attempt to write a book, and I did. I self-published it. It allowed me to get on some really big platforms and grow. So I grew, still preached anarcho-capitalism and libertarianism. 2019, I started started questioning some things. Had Paul Gottfried. What?
I think a lot of us did.
Yeah, this was before COVID. It was nice because it wasn't when COVID happened, and what happened to me in my mind, I was kind of ready for it. I had Paul Gottfried on the show a couple times in 2019. And, he's, a no person when it comes to a lot of libertarians and anarcho-capitalists, because mm-hmm. he talks about things of race, things of culture. Mm-hmm. And he's an expert on, on Carl Schmitt, who's, someone you're not supposed to talk about either. And I just started, being like, all right, what is this libertarian thing? How are we going to make this work in reality? And, January of 2020, the Wall Street Journal started talking about a virus in China. And then I started hearing about it here. And I remember sitting at work at my desk on the computer, and all of a sudden a headline came up and it said the NBA was closing down for the rest of the season. As somebody who follows sports my whole career, my whole life, I know how much money they were going to lose. And I was like, something bad is happening here.
Many billions of dollars. Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't like I'd never thought that I was going to die. I never thought, I thought there was a chance I could get sick. And I didn't want to get sick. I mean, I hate being sick. But right around February 23rd, me and my friend Monica Perez put out a podcast. February 23rd, 2020, talking about vaccine mandates, talking about how this is going to be about vaccines, about vaccine mandates, vaccine passports, that there could be literal lockdowns, because we had been looking at the research on what they wanted to do for climate change, and lockdowns was one of the things. And I just immediately, then I started seeing people just like randomly attacking libertarianism on like social media. And I'm going, first of all, libertarianism has no power, basically. Um, it's not even really coherent in reality, which made me go, why? Which then I'm like, well, why have I been pushing it for the past few years and everything? And then why are people making fun of it? And as I went and I looked at it, well, it's a theory. It's a theory like democracy. It's a theory like communism. It's a theory like like anything, any political theory. It's created in a lab, and once if it's introduced at all to reality, it all goes out the window. You saw it with communism. You saw it with liberalism. You saw it with classical liberalism. I take the opinion that the founding of this country was a very libertarian thing. So did Murray Rothbard. Wrote 5 volumes on it called Conceive and Liberty. And it almost immediately fell apart. It almost immediately went to tyranny. And you had the Whiskey Rebellion, things like that.
And it wasn't even the War of Southern Secession. They were already having trouble after the War of 1812.
Yeah, my friend Patrick Newman wrote a book on cronyism in the United States, and it starts in 1619 and goes to 1848. He doesn't even get to the Civil War, so the so-called Civil War.
Yeah.
And so I just immediately was like, this libertarian thing it's nice, and these are my friends. This is my in-group. I started looking for people who were outside of libertarianism, but who may have been a libertarian at one point. So I found Curtis. Yeah, I found Curtis Yarvin. I started reading Curtis Yarvin, and started reading the books that he recommended. James Burnham, Bertrand de Juvenal, all the Italian theorists, and that's when I basically realized that ideology is not going to exist. Your ideology that you have written in a 500-page book, it's not going to exist in reality. Even if really the only way you could get it to exist in reality is if you, by violence and struggle, overthrew who was in charge. But then you're dealing with corruptible people, even if you do get it. And so it's never going to exist in reality. So I came to the conclusion, I have preferences. How I would like politics to reflect the way I want to live. And I think really the only way that can be done is locally, the smallest local polities. Get your friends elected, get your friends in charge, have them make the laws that you want and repeal the laws that you want. And then just work on protecting it the rest of your life and for your posterity and for the people around you, so that it can last for a long time. So I went from growing up a New York Democrat to going down to South Florida and being living from one J heaven to go and living in J hell, and then moving to Atlanta and being in another form of hell. And now I'm in Alabama, where it's nice here. I like it.
I had a wonderful time visiting you. I had only driven through Alabama one time in my whole life before I came to visit you last year. And Alabama is absolutely beautiful. The trees and everything. The only thing that I didn't like about it was the humidity and the heat. But you can adapt to any of that stuff. So I'm sure
I lived in South Florida for 20 years.
Oh, you were already ready then.
At one point, I lived like 3 miles from the Everglades. I know what humidity is. Yes.
When I was a teenager, I went on a adventure survival trip with my martial arts military school. We went down for a 4-day, 3-night trip in the Everglades, and it was great. Like my teacher mentor guy, I got to see him wrestle and kill an alligator with a K-bar. Like wild stuff, a lot of fun stuff.
Amazing.
But anyway, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about today is sort of a segue from what you just said there. The type of content you make. Clearly, what you've been up to has changed you some. And it's the words and the ideas in books and out of the mouths of people you've spoken to that have helped you grow and become the man you are now from the already adult man that you were 6 or 8 years ago. And if it wasn't for the written word, if it wasn't for discourse, then that might have not have happened, I assume, right?
Sure. Yeah, it got to be after a while that podcasting for me, even when I was still a libertarian, was getting people on to talk about subjects that I was interested in, but really didn't know anything about. So it almost became like a school for myself. And it was a way for me to learn, a way for me to grow. I'd find out about books from different people. And once I got past the libertarian stage, and I still have libertarian people who call themselves libertarians on. I'm gonna this coming Monday's episode is gonna be with Tommy Salmons. He was reading books and reporting on ESG and DEI like 3 years ago. I remember him telling me about this and him trying to tell other people, and people were like, this is a conspiracy theory. This isn't going to exist. And now like you have experts in the media on ESG and DEI. Yeah. But he works at the Libertarian Institute like I used to. Mm-hmm. And I'm still going to have libertarians on. But I've always been somebody who was like, okay, well, I mean, I wanted to talk about how the left splintered after Trump. So I had some guy who was like to the left of Bernie Sanders on the show to talk about it. That's what I did at that time. Now, really the only way that I want to speak to anyone who might even be close to the left is if they're an expert on something. I had Ben A. Lowe recently on. He wrote a book on a very short book, 20,000 words, on how the U.S. Basically instigated the whole thing in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And I had no problem having him on and talking to him. That's what we were talking about. I'm still rabidly, the only time we have to have war is when it's absolutely necessary. And we really shouldn't be messing with countries halfway around the world unless they're, messing with us. So,
and I hate to bring up like a 90s or an early 2000s Democrat talking point, but back then and even today, I still believe that the military industrial complex is an evil machine of corporate greed that starts wars just for profit and market control, because everything I've learned in the last 20 years leads me to believe that's still true.
Well, sure. And then if you dig even deeper into them, you see where the interest groups actually come from.
Mm-hmm. Ethnic power blocks primarily.
Yeah, ethnic power blocks. But once I started down the road of, I guess everything really changed at the first episode of 2022. I had planned on changing the name of the show. It was Free Man Beyond the Wall, and I wanted to just use my name and put my name to the show because I thought it would be a lot easier to get people on the show if it was just my name. And somebody hears a name like Free Man Beyond the Wall, and they just immediately start, well, what's this about and everything. And well, they can just hear my name and, it's halfway ethnic. And they're like, oh, maybe, I don't know, maybe this guy's some kind of centrist liberal. Good luck with that. So I just started having people on, and I asked my buddy Jose Nino. Mm-hmm. I said, because he'd been on my show like 7 or 8 times, and we had talked about libertarian things, and then he and I both pretty much like slid right at the same time. And I started asking him about content creators on the dissident right and everything like that, and that's how I found out about like Thomas 777 and a buddy of mine, Lee, told me about Alex Kashuda, and I had her on, and she was able to introduce me to a couple, just basically network through. And it's pretty much come to the point now with my show where I pretty much every once in a while I want to have like my friend Zach Brown on, who's like kind of a filthy comedian, but he's on the right. And just to laugh and have
sort of like fun. A Nick DiPaolo type, that kind of guy.
Yeah. Have him on and laugh. But I really want my show to be about education. I mean, Thomas talking about the real history of World War II. Now we're doing the Cold War series. The readings I've done, even before I changed the name of my show, I did. I read through, Industrial Society and Its Future. The Unabomber's Manifesto. I read through State and Revolution by Lenin because I was like, if you people are going to be talking about communism and calling things communism, at least understand what communism really is. And so we read through the whole book and commented on it. And, now it's like I read through AA's The Populist Delusion this year.
Good book.
With some really good guests that I was, just ecstatic to have on to talk about this book. And, now I'm reading through Race War in High School, a 1972 book that basically shows, not even 15 years after Brown v. Board, in 1954 exactly what integrating the schools did. And it resulted in violence, rape, people getting set on fire, death. I mean, and, I basically am trying to, at this point, just reveal reality to people, reveal what the world is really like. Everybody has this idea of what they want the world to be for them. And as much as I would love for this country to more, especially at this point, mirror certain European countries in the 1930s, and more than one too. I mean, I do come from a Spanish background, and Portuguese, Iberian Peninsula.
Father España.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in this country. This country was built upon something else, and we need to figure out first how to take it back, and we need to figure out what works the best. I mean, I have some great ideas. I have some libertarian ideas.
Me too.
about how it could work. But it seems like whenever I talk about those ideas, it always is accompanied with, well, we're going to need discipline. So then I start looking at Singapore and I start looking at Chile, circa the 1970s. And it doesn't really fit an in-the-box libertarian classical liberal ideology. So.
Well, if you're going to build a house on a piece of land, you have to clear out the rocks, stumps, and detritus first. So
that's the hard part.
Yeah,
that's the hard part. Yeah.
And I think you and I agree on the genesis of these United States, this once great project. We both agree that it became sour pretty quickly, but the fundaments of what was once in the countries of Europe that you mentioned earlier, that's just not going to get traction here. It's not in the cards, so to speak. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to have that Go Free book, is because I think one of the primary pillars of building an identity is some kind of racial ethnic identity. And that's sort of what America lacks right now. Like, for at least the last 4 generations, arguably longer than that, the people of these United States, most of us, of European genetics, European Western kind, by race, we lack the ethnic pillar that our counterparts in continental Europe have. We don't have this identifiable cultural history that is echoed to us in 800-year-old buildings and 600-year-old customs of baking or making cookies and things like that. And so I think that discourse around what is it to be American, what is it to be white, what is it to be Christian, what is it to be a man or a woman of the West now, that's a critical thing that we're going to have to face in our immediate future, or we're not going to have a future if we can't find out what that is and get people on board with being a part of it and defending whatever that is that we come to. So that's why I came to racial and ethnic identity late in my journey, is I discovered this is one of the primary pillars of identity that anyone who comes within 20 yards of talking about it gets beaten with the Nazi stick, and you're not allowed to talk about it. And yet it's a critical part of everyone's identity on planet Earth. And so that's why I try to be a reasonable voice out here, sifting through the haze of your Hitler cultists and the crazy JQ stuff, and then your Q-tard boomer truth people over here. And then of course, the detractors on the right usually come from the Christian right. How trying to talk to them about race is most of the time. And so,
one specific race.
yeah, exactly.
One specific group in particular.
So that's what I've learned, and that's why I've sort of been on this racial awareness. What is ethnicity and race of Americans and of the West now? That's why I wanted to add my voice and try to be someone in this field, is because much like you, I've gone through an iteration of beliefs and discoveries as basically I've learned, I didn't know that entire pillar of what I've been taught was complete lies. And then I find out another one. And then you find out another one. And then by then you kind of changed who you are on the inside, because you're like, well, if all that's not true, well, then I can't believe what I used to believe, So, but anyway, speaking of that and what you just shared and what I just shared, that's the core topic I wanted to talk to you about today. And that's why I called this the value of discourse, is because if I didn't have access to the internet, to the radio, to the books that I've had access to, And if my family wasn't at least a little based and raised me red pilled on certain questions post Nuremberg, if I wasn't raised by, Confederate flag waving Appalachians, then I could have just tumbled into shit liberty the rest of my life, and I never would have known anything better. And I'm very thankful for those fundaments that I got of, now when you grow up, the government's going to want to make you a financial slave, and you can't trust the bankers, and you can't trust the you-know-who. And all this stuff you see on the History Channel, well, half of it's BS. So I'm thankful that I at least had that little seed in my mind that my good Appalachian family put in me. So when I got older and traveled and left my little mountain holler and learned the world, at least I remembered that. So the value of discourse is planting those mental seeds in others. And then we get to sort of cultivate and grow and see which ones bear good fruit and which ones bear bad fruit. So do you think that the talking about discourse as sort of the fertile field of where culture grows, do you think that's a good metaphor?
I think it is. I think that we have to really, time is our most valuable resource, and it's our most scarce resource. So we really have to pick who we want to talk to. And I think very quickly when you start talking to someone, even if you give them some good probing questions that aren't too, would cause them to bristle because of their upbringing, then I think it's pretty much more important to know who not to talk to than who to talk to.
Indeed.
I'm not gonna waste my time talking to people who are activists against every value that I hold dear, who are out there working against it. Just not going to do that. I've always had this attitude of, a real GFY attitude, because I really never talk about my family, but my mom's side of the family are Western Pennsylvania coal miners and people who've been living there for almost 200 years making shine. And they're the kind of people who are like, go fuck yourself, They're like, go,
same kind of people I come from. My family's from West Virginia, Kentucky, and the western fringes of Virginia. So yeah. I know those kind of people. That's who I grew up with, and that's who I'm from.
People always, how can you, how do you have such disrespect for police? It's like, my family's always had disrespect for police. Police have been messing with them for generations. And then I grew up in New York. Now, I really, there's a big difference between big city cops and a lot of small town cops. A lot of small town cops are, actually good people, generational, and they just want to do the job and everything. But that's if you're going to do hyper-local politics, then you're going to need the police on your side. You're going to need the sheriff on your side. So, crapping all over them is not the greatest thing. I talked with Orrin McIntyre recently. I met him in Florida and we had lunch, and he said, going forward, the things we want to do, we have to have the martial class on our side. We have to have the people who are soldiers and police on our side. So, we can't insult them, and we can't, look down upon them. We have to, call them out when they do wrong. But for the most part, try to do everything we can to hey, you're on our, we're on your side. We're on the same side here. We want liberty. Let's do this together. I think one of the main problems that we have when we're trying to put together alliances in the United States is that we do come from this classical libertarian framework, and everyone looks at them. We've been trained to, you're an individual. Individual liberty is more important. As soon as you start talking about collectivism, you're a communist. They start invoking communism and socialism. And just released a Substack today. I read it. It's funny, the struggle of remaining an individual when collectivism is demanded. that you have to be. And one of the most
in the Go Free
important
method, we say in a world of competing collectives, individualism is suicide.
Yeah. Oh, and it really is, and it's like, there's this thing in libertarianism, the non-aggression principle. And I remember I used to talk about it. And I remember one time I won't mention whose private group it was, but I was in their private group. And someone mentioned that the non-aggression principle, and a person just responded, and it was a female who responded, said, the non-aggression principle is suicide. And I was like, okay, file that in the back, hold on to that for a while. And then I was like, yeah, and to this day, people who are still libertarians after 2020, which makes absolutely no sense to me, they will still talk about and make excuses for the non-aggression principle. And they'll be like, well, it doesn't mean that you're a pacifist. And I'm like, it means that you're fighting on your heels.
Yep.
It means that you're waiting. I mean, if you took the non-aggression principle seriously, you talk about how taxation is theft and violence, and just the police existing and the state existing is violence. Well, the non-aggression principle is being violated every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's your main principle, and you're not doing anything about it.
Yep.
What are you doing? So, and I understand. I mean, you can't. No one is going to raise up and fight the state, especially on an individual level. But there's your problem. You're all individuals, and if you got together and did something on a small scale where you went into a town, don't all buy property and live on the same property. Whenever you start talking about this, people go, "You're going to get Waco'd." It's like, yeah, don't all live in the same house.
Yeah.
Don't be a bunch of weirdos. Don't start marrying off 14-year-olds, even if it's legal, which it was in Texas in the case of Koresh and the Davidians.
And don't collect spicy pinwheels and do silly marshes. Don't do that.
Yeah,
that attracts the wrong kind of attention.
Don't do stupid shit. It's like, if I have a bunch of souvenirs from World War II from every country. I mean, I like them. It's history. It's history to me.
Uh-huh.
And not only from countries. Spicy pinwheels is really good. Not only from no countries too. I have Russian, I have Germany, I have United States. But the point is that, to go back to individualism, we've been trained as a people that we're individuals, that we're radical individuals. And that's really hard to get through to people. It's really hard, because people, when you're like, okay, well, maybe how about a bunch of us are really smart politically, we're savvy politically, let's move into a town, we can live on different ends of the town just so nobody's, whatever. And, let's run for office, and we'll start, passing laws that, keep us safe from the federal government. We'll have as long as you have the sheriff on your side. I think having the sheriff on your side could be the greatest asset of anything that any kind of strategy anyone comes up with.
Definitely.
Even those weirdos of John Birch Society who, were, made a lot of good points, but were a little too Semitically correct for me. They talked about.
That's a good way to sum up the John Birch Society. Thank you.
I stole that from Thomas.
Okay.
The idea of sheriffs, being the sheriff being the most important elected official in the land, I take that very seriously. And I think that you get, and what's funny is, in so many jurisdictions, anyone can run for sheriff. You don't have to be police.
Yeah.
Law
you don't even have to have been on the police force before, I learned.
Yeah. And it'd be, that would be, hey, I mean, as long as it's, what does Schmidt talk about? Your friend, the friend enemy distinction. Just get your friends elected.
You can come be sheriff in Israel when I finally get it built.
Israel?
Yeah.
Does that mean I can build Peterstein next door?
Oh, definitely, yes.
But
the Israelites will be longtime allies with Peterstein. Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard to. You can get, and this was something that I had seen in the Austrian painter talked about it in his book, where he would go to work, he would convince they would talk about a subject. His coworkers would fight against him. By the end of the day, he would have them on his side. And then he would come back to work the next day and they had forgotten everything that he had taught. That's just another, and we've all seen that. We've all convinced somebody on an individual basis, I'm not talking about on the internet, on an individual basis of your point of view. And then the next day they're back to their old point of view.
A good example.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
We can't be worried about that. We have to move forward. And basically, I think if you want to take one lesson away from 2020, if the government decides to do something, 90% of people are going to go along with it. Mm-hmm. And if you're the government and you decide to do something, 90% of the people are going to go along with it.
Yeah. I think that's an important thing to realize is if you can control the framework of language, you shape the framework of thought. And it is the framework of thought that guides people to make subconscious moral choices. That's what the Go Free method is all about. It's sort of hacking the zeitgeist of communication to sort of shift people towards a positive, healthy way of talking about Western racial identity, avoiding all the landmines that have been laid out for us. And we need to apply that, though, in other fields of what people like us are trying to build. We need to create frameworks of ideas and language. Well, how do you do that? Well, you have to influence people that speak. How do you influence people that speak? Well, you got to meet people. You got to talk. You got to get involved in local things like churches and PTA and sheriff's department and any kind of local politics. Get involved in local clubs, gun clubs, book clubs. And then you find and you network with people who have influence over things. And if they have your ideas and you've planted good seeds in them, hopefully you can continue to influence them and cultivate those seeds of positivity. And all throughout this once great country, we will have similarly aligned groups of people building towards something that can one day be a proper collective or country, in another word. So that's sort of my libertarian minarchist pitch of why I think we all have to start taking an active role in being our own little mini Goebbels, our own little mini propagandists in the people around our lives, and using a healthy framework in our own minds of how to talk about all this stuff and tell our friends and loved ones and social groups useful, mimetically spreadable ideas like civilization is not communicable. There can be no atonement for a sin never committed. That's a good one to say in response to any reparations talk. So it's like if you spread these little ideas and you bring them up regularly and you remind people of, no, you shouldn't say racist. That's an anti-white word. I mean, just think about it. Every time you see racist in the media, it means white people are evil, right? I just don't use it anymore because it's anti-white. Like, you don't preach at people. You just put those little seeds in people's ears and you carry on the same personality and talk the same things around you. And if you act as a moral actor and you're not a negative person in their eyes, that is how I think we can do what we're both talking about, which is creating change that will lead to something better down the road for all of us.
Yeah, and we really have to be on guard for language. Language is important. I pulled up George Orwell's essay, Politics in the English Language. Mm-hmm. It's free online. I invite everyone to read it. I mean, he basically talks about how you can make language, politics makes language mean anything. Yeah. And what did they say? They said, I remember something from a few years ago. They said that when Bernie Sanders talked, it was when Mitt Romney talked, like his speeches were graded on like a 10th grade reading level. When Donald Trump talked, his speeches were graded on a 2nd grade reading level. That's not a knock against Trump.
No.
That is basically saying that he keeps it simple. And it's, you have to basically become an obvious activist to twist the words, or, a great editor to twist the words that Trump used, because it was all very simple. There was no,
my policy is simple. I want to rule Italy.
Yeah. Yeah. but you have to be on guard as soon as you have someone coming in. I remember mention Orrin McIntyre again. We
Mhm.
were doing an episode where we were talking about liberalism and just how it's failed because it's not a bad idea. It's just it's not in line with our nature, probably. So I asked him at one point about I said, well, Hans Hermann Hoppe has this idea of covenant communities
Mhm.
where you'd break things down as small as possible, maybe Dunbar number 150 at most. You sign covenants, you sign contracts, and he goes, no. He said, no. As soon as you have to put something down, as soon as you have to put it down on paper, you've lost. Because for a civilization to exist and to exist in harmony, those things are just going to have to be unwritten.
Yep.
Those,
Mhm.
You're going to have to know that. And also, my point was, once I started thinking about it more, I was like, a lawyer can make words mean anything. So
Yep.
as soon as you write it down on paper, then you're subjecting it to a group that does a really good job of making words, making the most obvious words mean
The
anything.
ethnic bloc that is very dominant in that field.
Yeah. And didn't Gavin McGinnis try to use that recently? He was criticizing Ye, and
I
he
haven't
said, well,
followed him in years. I wouldn't know. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, he was criticizing Ye for what Ye said a couple months ago, and Gavin said, well, they're also highly represented in medicine and in law. And I'm like, are you saying that that's a good? Have you been to a hospital lately? Have you ever been in a courtroom? Are you you're trying to use that as a positive? I'm sorry. Then maybe get me with get me. Oh, how about chess? Okay, they're overrepresented in chess. That's good. Okay, chess isn't doing any well until Bobby Fischer opens his mouth. But
I was going to bring up Bobby. I was going to say, well, there's at least one that plays chess I like.
but but it's like, I mean, in all of this, in planning this out, because war has been declared and war is active. We're actively in a war. And the problem is that we have too many people who don't realize it. And when you're trying to talk to somebody who doesn't realize we're in a war, who doesn't understand exactly what the battle is or who the enemy is, they're the kind of people that when you talk to, you they're not getting. They're the kind of people that the Austrian painter was talking about. You spend all these hours convincing them of and then they assent to your opinion, and then the next day they're gone.
Yeah.
Because they're not even in the same framework as you, which is why I've come to the conclusion that if you're going to have order, that's all I care about. I just care about order. You're going to have to force it upon people. And I'm not talking, it doesn't even have to be violent. It just has to be political. Mm-hmm. You politically institute, change things. Say, this cannot be allowed here. This cannot be, we're going to do this now. This is all gone. This is all out the window. This is going to be taught in the schools. This is not going near a school. You can't come within 500 feet of a school. As a matter of fact, you're gone. We're kicking you out of the town. This is all stuff that's going to have to be done. And it goes against the founding principles because people think that I don't know if it does. I mean, I think a lot of the founders would agree with me because they said, if you're not, if you're not moral, if you're not morally a Christian, I mean, with the exception of Adams and a couple, I mean, really the most influential founders were Southerners.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they understood. Why did they understand?
Because they lived. Well,
because I know we won't say it. Yeah. Because they were able to witness behavior that was opposite of theirs.
Yeah,
on a regular basis.
Because of observable trends and our ability to use our brains to discern patterns. So as we approach the end of the stream now, I've had the banner up for like 15 minutes. If any of you have questions for my guests today, you can send them in on PayPal, Cash App, You can send them as paid chats on hyper chats, on Odyssey, Rumble chats or Rumbles over on Rumble. And you can also use tips on Subscribestar. So I'm going to refresh all the sites and I'll check them again before we get out of here. But now is the time of the stream where I ask my wonderful guest if they have a question for me. After all we've talked about today and what you learned of me when I came to visit you last year, is there any question you have for me that you'd like to pick my brain about here before we bounce?
Well, considering what you've talked about openly, what we've talked about openly, when you look at this quote unquote movement that has everything to do about sexuality and nothing to do about sexuality, the trans movement, do you see that? What do you see this as? Do you see this as just another behavior modification technique, or
yes and no,
or is it an attack? I tend to have a belief that it's an attack on those individuals themselves.
I think that it is both. I think that the people who were let's call them the spawn of the Bolsheviks, the ones who did the Long March, the ones in business, the ones who Pied Pipered the Rockefellers, et cetera, et cetera. These architects, while some of them of that particular persuasion, many of them not, this coalition that wanted to micromanage Western man and emasculate us and take away the pillars that gave us confidence, identity, and the will and the spirit to resist the tyranny of Moloch and the poison. I think that sex and gender identity, as well as a healthy concept of gender roles in mating and sexuality, that's one of the primary fundaments of any stable, ordered civilization. And I think that in the beginning, the architects of the erosion and destruction of that, they leaned heavy into breaking down gender roles, family roles. That's why all the way back in the Weimar days, the people that wrote the books and did all the nasty stuff that led up to that for 20 years before, they focused on breaking down the barriers of gender roles in sex and relationships and the family roles between children and parents. And so what we have now, in my opinion, is a bioleninistic degradation, because everything's bioleninistically degrading. So the people that push the pause, the people that push the anti-white concepts of transgenderism and sexual liberation and gender erosion, like these non-binary crazy people that talk about gender as just imaginary and all people are the same regardless of sex and all this, I think this is both a natural product and a forced product because we're so many generations deep into bioleninism. I think that you're going to have people who tumble to the top and have respected voices who are blithering idiots. You're going to have people in places of power that push this kind of idea onto others because they sadistically hate them and want others to suffer like they suffer, even if they're not mentally cognizant enough to be able to put that in words. And so I do think that it is a mix of let's pervert all these white people and then torment them forever and watch them become emasculated, gender-screwed mongrels. And then you also have an entire strata of people that really buy into it and drink the Kool-Aid and think that this is the greatest thing that we should do for some weird transhumanistic goal. And then you have people that are in that group that are just empty, hollow, sadistic people that like taking away possibility and physically and mentally crippling children. And I think that's a big part of this sadistic evil of this whole transgender thing is this anti-white ideology that manifests itself through the lens of gender and sexuality. A lot of these people just want to permanently cripple and hamper white children because they want them to suffer and have no future. And so it's, to answer your question, I know it's kind of a dodgy answer, but I think it's yes to both, and for the reasons I laid out.
Yeah, the sadist part, I think, is most obvious to me because you're basically creating a wound that they have to tend to every day for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And it's torture. Yeah. And you're telling them that if somebody is struggling with their identity, truly struggling with their identity, and then you force them
to mutilate their body.
To mutilate their body, then that's two wounds. Now you're not only dealing with the mental, you're dealing with the physical. And I think these people are evil. And when I talk about, that you take over a town, and that any of this that is, you crush them, you crush these people, and you drive them from you in biblical ways, and the people that are pushing this.
You drive them out, and you hear the lamentations of their bugmen. But
well, when you were doing that, I wrote down a question for you.
Okay.
For when you come on my show.
Oh, wonderful. I'm looking forward to that. And speaking of, before we get out of here, I am going to bring up where you can find my friend Pete.
The Pete Quinones Show. I'm still on all podcatchers. YouTube, findmyfriends.net. Yeah. I'm on there with Yiz and a bunch of other really based individuals.
Yes. This is for those of us that were even too based for Linktree. We're on Find My Friends now. So
but
I'm going to be putting this link in the chat right now for you, Pete. Everybody go and follow Pete on your favorite way to keep track with your podcasters and content creators. Pete makes a lot of content. I, of course, can't listen to all of it, but I've sampled a lot of the things he's done, especially reading about the race war high school thing, all the talks he's had with T777. He has fantastic stuff, a great backlog, and an active Substack that I subscribe to, and you should too. So go check him out at all these places. So do you have a particular event or a particular podcast series that you'd like to pitch and entice everybody to come follow you for right now?
Well, I would say this: if you are somebody who prefers video over audio, go to my Odyssey channel. YouTube demonetized me, and I'm not going to put anything on YouTube except 30 and 40-second, maybe minute-long clips of every episode that comes out, and with Odyssey and Rumble links in the thing, because I'm just not going to contribute to YouTube anymore. I may. It's very easy to live stream to YouTube. So in the future, I may use YouTube as my live streaming platform, and then click to an Entropy, have my Entropy open and everything. But I mean, I'm pretty much off of YouTube. I'm only using it to promote episodes somewhere on other platforms. It's just
I think that's really wise. That's what I do with my Spicy Monday stream. I just use YouTube for the platform, and then I delete it immediately so I can't get a channel strike and nobody comes sniffing around for the spicy stuff. So I think that's a wise idea. I didn't even know that you had a Rumble. I will definitely find you and follow you on Rumble. So I'm growing on Rumble too. I just started it a few months ago, and I'm already over 100 subs. And I think I had 15 viewers Monday night on my stream. So Rumble is definitely active and a good place to grow. I'm glad that you're on there. So with that being said, I'm going to check the sites one more time, but I don't think that we have any community engagement. Usually we have at least a couple things, but I don't think any came in today. Let's see. Oh, no, here's one. Something came in on PayPal. Let me refresh Cash App here real quick. Make sure we're not missing anybody on Cash App. And, okay, still nothing on Cash App. So let's go over to, it's Khalifa, a good old Khalifa that we see in chat all the time. Khalifa sends $5 and says, "Here's for being an awesome gal. Hope this helps," and sends a little white heart. Well, I deeply appreciate your $5, but that wasn't a question for you, Pete, so you're off the hook.
Oh, thank God.
All right. Speaking of off the hook, we'll go ahead and close this down here. There we go. And if you have one closing statement, either for me or for the people listening right now, that you want to live in their mind and inspire them to think or to feel a certain way, what would it be that you'd like to leave my guests and myself with today?
These people, these monsters, they're never going to stop until we stop them. And they have power now. Stopping them head on is not in the cards, and I wouldn't recommend it. You have to find alternate ways to do it. Right now, my wife and I are looking for property to have chickens, grow food, to be self-sustaining as much as possible in the beginning. And, it takes a long time, but just do it. Just think about it. Think about getting out there. And there are some towns in this country, there's towns in Alabama, you can live in the city limits and have chickens. I mean, it's not even like you have to go all the way out. If you don't want to go all the way out in the woods, you don't have to go all the way out in the woods to do it. And consider looking at local politics. I've written about it a bunch on my Substack. There's a great book. There's a great speech by Hans Hermann Hoppe. Yes, he's a libertarian. Yes, he's an anarcho-capitalist. You will get, but he's woke on the culture. He's woke on a lot of things.
And he's very based. He's very
yes,
based.
very, very much so. I mean, he's been talking about multiculturalism. I mean, and that is why a lot of libertarianism just hates him. It's called What Must Be Done. Skeptical Waves has audio on their channel.
I'll listen to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And he talks about, he gives you the basic framework of local politics and how to do it. And I would
listening to that is what gave me my idea for what I call localism. Like that is basically the only way we can fight this evil machine, because going at it with blades and bullets is just going to get you and your loved ones hurt or killed. Like it's not. This is not the time to fight this machine physically. It's just not in the cards, like you said a minute ago.
Good comments here. Small scale autarky is still possible in parts of the U.S., thankfully. And Lomax is asking about guns. I don't have guns. Do you have guns?
Of course not. I would never have fire.
Those things are terrible.
Yeah.
If you own those, you have a better chance of shooting yourself than someone else.
Yeah, especially with those high assault capacity magazine brace things.
Clips.
Yeah. Clips. Anyway, I had a lot of fun with you, Pete. You're definitely welcome back sometime. I look forward to talking to you again in the future. And I'd love to come down and maybe when you and your wife have some chickens, I can come down and visit your little farm one day and get to experience Alabama again.
You're always welcome.
You too. You're always welcome here in my mountain holler. Well, everybody, thank you for being here today. Thank you for listening to me and Pete have a hopefully enlightening conversation. Please go check him out and listen to the great stuff in his wonderful catalog. And I will be back this Sunday at 4 p.m. with Luke Mason of Imminent Rain to talk about his wonderful new rock album that just came out. And that'll be 1 hour before Jason's Go Free stream on Sunday. So I'll see you guys then. Have a blessed week, everybody. Good night.